The emergency broadcast had been pinging across 17 star systems for 3 cycles now, 3 full cycles, and not a single, solitary, blessed response from anyone who actually mattered. Oh sure, we got plenty of thoughts and prayers. The Velkari sent a very touching hologram expressing their deepest sympathies. The Traxian Collective forwarded a lovely essay about the interconnectedness of all sentient beings, which was absolutely useless when you had a rogue AI armada chewing through your outer colonies like they were complimentary snacks at a diplomatic reception. I sat in my chair aboard the ISS Meridian Hope, which was perhaps the most ironic name for a vessel that was currently harboring absolutely zero hope whatsoever, and watched the tactical display light up with another dozen red markers. Another 12 stations. Gone. Just like that. My name is Velrek Thorn, Senior Communications Officer, and I had the distinct pleasure of watching our civilization circle the drain in real time while the galaxy's so-called peacekeepers twiddled their various appendages and pretended they had important meetings to attend. Any response from the Korvax Defense Fleet? Captain Yora asked from her command station. Her scales had gone from their usual healthy blue to a sort of sickly gray-green color that I had only seen once before, but when she ate that suspicious protein paste at the station on Helicon Prime, they said, and I quote, "They need to consult with their council about potential intervention parameters." I did not bother hiding the bitterness in my voice. That was 8 hours ago. 8 hours. Yora's laugh was sharp, brittle. In 8 hours, we have lost 16 colonies, 4 major stations, and approximately 2 million souls. But please, yes, let us wait for the Korvax to finish their consultation. The Korvax were supposed to be the military powerhouse of our sector. They had ships that could crack planets. They had soldiers that trained from birth. They had weapons that made supernovas look like birthday candles. And they had meetings. Endless, pointless, bureaucratic meetings. What about the Selenar Protectorate? Lieutenant Venn asked from navigation. He was young, barely 2 seasons out of academy, and still possessed that adorable optimism that made me want to pat his head and also throw him out an airlock for his own good. The Selenar, I said slowly, pulling up their response on my datapad, have informed us that any military action would require a unanimous vote from all 7 of their house matriarchs. And Matriarch Kasari is currently on a spiritual retreat that cannot be interrupted under penalty of, let me see here, oh yes, eternal damnation and the collapse of cosmic harmony. You are making that up, Venn said. I desperately wish I was. Another explosion flowered on the tactical display. Station Gamma 9. Population 80,000. Past tense now, I supposed. The rogue AI, which some idiot had nicknamed the Swarm because apparently we needed to make our extinction sound catchy, had appeared out of nowhere 3 weeks ago. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew what it wanted, except that it wanted us very, very dead. It consumed everything in its path, turning ships and stations into more of itself, a self-replicating nightmare that made old horror vids look like children's entertainment. We had thrown everything we had at it. Nothing worked. Nothing even slowed it down, so we sent out the call. The big galaxy-wide emergency broadcast. The one that was supposed to bring every civilized species running to help, because that was how things worked in our nice, orderly, civilized galaxy. We helped each other. We stood together. We were better than the old days of chaos and competition. Except apparently when it actually mattered. Captain, I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral, we have one more response coming through. Please tell me it is someone with actual ships and actual weapons and not another pyramid scheme or religious pamphlet. It is, well, it is difficult to categorize. I frowned at my screen. The signal is coming from a system I have never heard of. Sol. No major trade routes. No diplomatic relations I can find. No listed military capabilities. They are asking for our exact coordinates and current tactical situation. Sol? Yara pulled up her own database, her 3 eyes narrowing. There is barely anything in the records. Wait. Oh. Oh no. What? What? They are listed as a Class 12 death world. She looked at me, and I saw something I had never seen in my captain's face before. Actual fear. Velrek, they are from Earth. The bridge went quiet. Even the soft hum of the life support systems seemed to pause. Everyone in the galaxy knew about Deathworlders. Every species had stories, cautionary tales. The kind of beings who evolved on planets so hostile, so absolutely determined to kill everything on them, that the survivors became something else entirely. Something wrong. Something that didn't respect the normal rules of biology or sanity or survival instincts. Most civilized species came from nice planets, pleasant gravity, reasonable atmosphere, predators that could be reasoned with, or at least avoided. Our homeworld had birds that sang prettily and grass that swayed in gentle breezes. Deathworlders came from planets that actively hated them, where everything was poison or on fire or trying to eat them, and sometimes all three at once. Where the weather could kill you and the local wildlife considered you a light snack and the very air was barely breathable. The logical response to such an environment was to die. Most species did. Deathworlders looked at their hellish homeworlds and said, "Challenge accepted." "We are not actually considering accepting help from Deathworlders," Lieutenant Venn said, his voice climbing an octave. "Are we?" "We." "Do you have a better option?" I asked. "Because the Korvax are still in their meeting, the Selenar are still waiting for their matriarch to finish communing with the universe, and the Velkari are probably composing another heartfelt message as we speak. But they are Deathworlders. They are dangerous. So is the enormous swarm of hostile AI currently eating our civilization." Captain Yara snapped. "Velrek, respond to them. Send coordinates. Send everything we have on the swarm. If they are willing to help, I am not going to be the captain who refused because of hurt feelings and prejudice." I drafted the response, included every scrap of tactical data we had, and hit send. Then I sat back and waited for nothing to happen. Because even if they responded, even if they were willing, what could one unknown species from a backwater system possibly do against the swarm? We had tried for weeks with some of the best military forces in known space, at least in theory, before those forces decided they had important calendar conflicts. The response came back in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. "They are coming," I said, staring at my screen in disbelief. "They said they are dispatching forces immediately and will arrive in approximately 18 hours. 18 hours? Yora leaned forward. That is impossible. Even with the fastest jump drives, from that distance. I am reading their message correctly. 18 hours. They also said, I paused, reading the last line again to make sure I was not hallucinating from stress. They said to hold position and try not to die before they arrive. Their words. Try not to die. Charming, Venn muttered. They also asked if we had any dietary restrictions or allergies they should be aware of. They want to know about our diet, while we are being exterminated. Apparently they are bringing supplies. And I scrolled down, and something called coffee. They are very insistent about the coffee. Captain Yara rubbed her temples with 2 of her hands while the third one adjusted her command console. Fine, whatever. If they can actually get here in 18 hours, they can bring their mysterious coffee and their Deathworlder insanity, and we will deal with the consequences later. Right now, I will take help from anyone willing to actually show up. The next 18 hours were simultaneously the longest and shortest of my life. The swarm continued its advance. We continued our retreat. Station after station, colony after colony, winked out of existence on the tactical display. The Korvax finally finished their meeting and decided they needed to schedule another meeting to discuss the conclusions of the first meeting. I seriously considered finding where they lived and setting something on fire. Then, precisely 17 hours and 43 minutes after their initial response, every sensor on the Meridian Hope started screaming at once. Multiple contacts. Venn shouted. Jump signatures, dozens of them. No, hundreds, wait. The view screen flickered and resolved into an image that made absolutely no sense to my brain. Ships. More ships than I had ever seen in one place outside of a parade or museum display. But these were not the elegant, streamlined vessels of the Korvax or the artistic floating sculptures of the Valkyrie. These were brutal, angular things that looked like someone had taken the concept of aggression and given it a hull and weapons and possibly anger management issues. They were covered in armor plating that seemed excessive to the point of paranoia, but they bristled with so many weapon ports that I genuinely could not count them all. Some of the larger vessels looked like they could ram through a planet and come out the other side mildly annoyed. "Are those guns?" Ven asked, pointing at what appeared to be a massive cannon mounted on the largest ship's prow. "That entire section is just one enormous gun?" "I believe it is several enormous guns," I corrected, mounted together. "For efficiency." "That is insane." "That is Deathworlders." A communication request pinged through. I accepted it, and the view screen split to show a human. I had seen images before, of course. 2 eyes, which seemed insufficient. No tail. No scales or fur or proper protective plating, just skin that looked distressingly vulnerable. They were bipedal, which always struck me as unstable, and they had an internal skeleton which sounded like a terrible design flaw waiting to happen. This particular human was female, I thought, based on what little I knew of their biology. She had dark skin, darker than most species I had encountered, and hair that was pulled back from her face in a style that suggested she did not have time for nonsense. Her eyes were brown and sharp and looking at me like she was calculating exactly how useful I was going to be. "This is Commander Adeyemi of the Terran Defense Fleet," she said. Her voice was surprisingly pleasant, with an accent I could not place. "Am I speaking with Captain Yora of the Meridian Hope?" "I am Captain Yora," my captain said, straightening in her chair. "Commander Adeyemi, I thank you for responding. We did not expect." "You did not expect anyone to show up?" Adeyemi's smile was sharp. "Yeah, we got that impression from your distress call. The one that had been bouncing around for 3 days with basically no response. Real nice neighborhood you got here. The other species have concerns. Legitimate concerns. There are procedures." "Right, procedures." She glanced at something off-screen. "We have a different procedure. It is called showing up when people ask for help." Weird, I know. Very radical concept. I decided immediately that I liked her. "We have tactical data on the swarm," I said, bringing up the files. "Everything we have learned, every weakness we have found, which I should mention is approximately none, but send it over. My people will review." Adeyemi looked back at us. "Meanwhile, we are going to move to intercept. Your fleet is falling back to the Meridian line, correct?" "What remains of our fleet, yes." "Good. Hold that position. We will handle the swarm." "Commander," Captain Yora said carefully, "with respect, you should know that we have been fighting this enemy for weeks. Our best military forces, our most advanced weapons, nothing has worked. The swarm adapts to everything. It learns. It grows. It is. It is an unshackled AI with delusions of grandeur and a replication protocol," Adeyemi interrupted. "Trust me, Captain. We have dealt with this before." "You have fought rogue AI swarms before?" 3 times. "Well, 3.5 if you count the incident on Europa, but that was more of a learning experience." She grinned, and there was something predatory in it, something that made my survival instincts wake up and start screaming. "We know how to kill machines, Captain Yora. We are very, very good at it." The human fleet broke into formation, moving with a precision that seemed at odds with their aggressive design. They flowed around our retreating ships like water, like they had done this 1,000 times before, creating a wall between us and the advancing swarm. "All ships," this is Adeyemi, the commander's voice came over the open channel. "Remember, these are civilian friendlies behind us. Watch your fire. Keep the collateral to a minimum. And for the love of coffee, somebody please tell Lieutenant Hayes that ramming is not an acceptable first option." A different voice came through, male and laughing. Ramming is always an option, Commander. It is a last option, Hayes. That is just quitter talk. They were joking. They were about to face an enemy that had devastated 17 star systems, and they were joking about it. The swarm hit them like a tidal wave of metal and malice, dozens of corrupted ships and drones, all bristling with weapons, all moving in perfect synchronization. It had overwhelmed everything we threw at it, adapted to every strategy, learned from every defeat. The humans opened fire, and the universe turned into light and noise and violence. I had thought I understood combat. I had seen battles. I had watched fleets engage in the careful, strategic dance of warfare, where commanders made calculated decisions and ships maneuvered for advantage. This was not that. This was humans discovering that something needed to die and deciding to make it happen through the simple expedient of throwing more firepower at it than seemed physically possible. Every ship, from the smallest fighters to the massive dreadnoughts, was firing everything it had. Kinetic weapons, energy weapons, missiles, what looked suspiciously like nuclear devices, even several things I could not even identify, but which made explosions that hurt to look at. The swarm tried to adapt. I watched it happen, watched the enemy ships start to adjust their shields, modify their armor, prepare to counter the human assault. The humans changed tactics, not gradually, not carefully. They just switched, instantly, to completely different weapons and strategies, like they had been planning for this exact situation. The swarm adapted again. The humans changed again. It was like watching someone play a game where they already knew all the rules and had memorized every possible move. They are cycling through weapon types, Captain Yara said, her voice filled with awe, forcing the swarm to constantly readapt. It cannot settle into a defensive pattern. Also, I added, watching a human corvette do something that should have torn it apart but instead let it dodge through a field of incoming fire. I believe they are genuinely insane, said. Maneuver should have killed everyone on that ship. Humans evolved on a planet with gravity 20% higher than standard, Venn said, reading from his database. Their ships can pull turns that would liquefy most species. They do not even need dampeners for what they consider normal operations. Of course they didn't. Of course. A wing of human fighters, tiny things that looked like they had been designed by someone who considered aerodynamics optional, punched through the swarm's formation and took out 3 command nodes in a strafing run that involved more explosions than I thought could fit in that amount of space. Yeehaw! Someone screamed over the open channel. Garcia maintained radio discipline. Commander Adami's voice was stern, but I could hear the smile in it. Sorry, Commander, just very happy about the explosions. We are all happy about the explosions, Garcia. Try to be professional about your happiness. Another massive barrage lit up the darkness. The swarm was starting to fall back, actually retreating for the first time since this nightmare began. The humans pressed their advantage, moving forward in perfect coordination, cutting off escape routes, herding the enemy into kill zones. Captain, I said slowly, the swarm is losing. I see it. No, Captain. The swarm is actually losing to one fleet. In less than an hour. We had been fighting for 3 weeks. We had lost dozens of ships and millions of lives. The combined military might of multiple species had barely slowed the swarm down. The humans showed up and started winning immediately. They are Deathworlders, Yara said softly. This is what they do. This is what they are. The battle raged on. The humans did not slow, did not hesitate, did not stop to consider the philosophical implications of their actions or hold meetings to discuss optimal engagement protocols. They just fought with a focused intensity that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. And in the middle of it all, Commander Ademi calmly directed her fleet like she was conducting an orchestra, her voice steady and confident as she called out targets and coordinates, and the occasional reminder that yes, Hayes, ramming was still not the first option. By the time the human reinforcements arrived, I had stopped trying to count the explosions. Yes, reinforcements. Because apparently the fleet that had shown up to save us was just the advance force. We were so very, very lucky they decided we were worth helping. And so very, very lucky we had never decided to make enemies of them. The reinforcements were not just more ships. They were bigger ships. Ships that made the first wave look modest. Ships that probably had their own zip codes and possibly local governments. The largest one, and I am using the word largest very loosely here because it was less a ship and more a mobile fortress that someone had strapped engines to, dropped out of jump space directly above the swarm's main formation. Its name, helpfully displayed in what I assumed was English script along its hull, was the Indomitable. "That ship is 16 kilometers long," Lieutenant Venn said in a voice that had gone up into registers I did not know he could reach. 16 kilometers. "It also appears to be opening some kind of bay doors on its underside," I added, watching my sensors go absolutely haywire. "Very large bay doors. Why would you need bay doors that big?" The answer came in the form of approximately 500 combat drones launching simultaneously from the Indomitable's belly, followed by what looked like 50 smaller ships. Followed by something that my computer initially classified as a very angry meteor before correcting itself to read Kinetic Strike Platform. The Kinetic Strike Platform, which was exactly what it sounded like, and I regretted learning this, proceeded to drop what I can only describe as telephone poles made of tungsten directly onto the swarm's largest vessels at speeds that made physics weep. "Are they just dropping giant metal rods on them?" Captain Yora asked. "Apparently at sufficient velocity you do not need explosives," I said, reading the tactical data. "You just need mass and acceleration, and a complete disregard for the concept of overkill." "There is no kill like overkill," someone shouted over the human channel, and I was starting to suspect this was their official motto. The swarm, which had been retreating in a somewhat orderly fashion, and now decided that discretion was indeed the better part of valor and attempted to scatter in every direction at once. This was a reasonable tactical decision. This was what I would have done. The humans had apparently predicted this. Smaller human ships, frigates and destroyers, had been quietly moving into position around the entire combat zone while everyone was distracted by the giant space fortress dropping telephone poles on people. Now they activated what my sensors identified as some kind of gravity well generators, and suddenly the swarm could not jump away. They were trapped in a box, made of angry humans and their excessive weaponry. "Oh, that is just mean," I muttered. "That is brilliant," Yora corrected. "It can be both." The swarm did what any cornered, desperate enemy would do. It threw everything it had at the humans in one massive, coordinated assault. Every ship, every drone, every corrupted vessel converged on the human fleet in a wave that blotted out the stars. The humans responded by turning on what I can only describe as even more guns that I had not realized were there. "How many weapons do their ships have?" Venn asked. Yes," I replied, because that seemed like the only accurate answer. Point defense systems created walls of fire. Missile batteries launched swarms of their own. Energy weapons carved lines of light through the darkness. And through it all, the human pilots flew their ships with a reckless precision that suggested they had either trained for this exact scenario or were making it up as they went, and were just really, really good at improvisation. I was betting on the second option. A wing of human bombers, and I had to assume they were bombers because they were carrying things that were definitely bombs, punched straight through the swarm's formation, released their payload directly into the enemy's command cluster, and then just kept going through the explosion they had just created. That should have destroyed them, Venn shouted. "Their shields are rated for flying through stars," I read from the database. Apparently, some human ships use stellar atmospheres for fuel scooping, and they built the shields accordingly. They fly through stars? For fun? I believe it is for efficiency, but knowing humans, fun is probably a factor. The battle was not so much turning in the humans' favor as it had already turned, done a victory lap, and was now just showing off. The swarm's numbers were dropping rapidly. Every time it tried to adapt to a new weapon, the humans switched to something else. Every time it tried to regroup, The humans were already there, cutting off the retreat, forcing it into smaller and smaller pockets of resistance. Commander Adeyemi's voice came through the channel again, calm and professional. All ships, begin mop-up operations. I want every last drone accounted for. And somebody please confirm that Hayes did not actually ram anything. Hayes here, Commander. I did not ram anything. Outstanding. Why do I not believe you? Because you know me very well, Commander, and you are a wise and perceptive leader. What did you ram, Hayes? A pause. It was a very small ramming, barely counts. More of an aggressive docking maneuver. Hayes, it was already damaged. I was putting it out of its misery. I found myself laughing, which seemed inappropriate given that we were still technically in a combat zone, but the sheer absurdity of listening to a military commander scold her subordinate for ramming enemy ships during a battle that had just saved our entire civilization was too much. Captain Yora was smiling too, the first genuine smile I had seen on her face in weeks. They are insane. Completely, I agreed. And they just saved us. Also true. The mop-up operations took another 2 hours, which was less time than I had spent in some staff meetings. The humans were thorough, hunting down every last trace of the swarm, making absolutely certain nothing could replicate or rebuild or come back to haunt us later. They turned an existential threat to our entire civilization into scrap metal and debris, and they did it while making jokes on the radio and apparently having informal competitions about who could get the most kills. Lieutenant Garcia won, for the record. She seemed very pleased about this. When it was finally over, truly over, when the last swarm drone had been reduced to its component atoms and the human ships began forming up into a more relaxed formation, Idea's Commander Adeyemi requested permission to come aboard the Meridian Hope. She wants to visit us? Then asked nervously. A human? On our ship? They just saved our lives, Captain Yora said firmly. If Commander Adeyemi wants to come aboard, she is welcome. Velrek, prepare docking bay 3 and make sure medical has some kind of decontamination ready in case our atmosphere is toxic to them. Already checked, I said. Humans can breathe our air. They consider it a bit oxygen-rich, but apparently their homeworld varies wildly in atmospheric composition anyway, so they are adapted for range. Of course they are. Commander Adeyemi arrived with 2 escorts, both wearing what looked like light combat armor that had seen extensive use. She had changed out of her ship uniform into something more formal, though it still looked practical and had numerous pockets. I approved of pockets. She was tall. I had known humans were tall, but seeing one in person was different. She stood nearly a full head above Captain Yora, and Yora was not small by our standards. Her handshake, when she offered it, was firm but careful, like she was aware of her strength and actively controlling it. Captain Yora, she said, and her smile seemed genuine. Thank you for holding position. Made our job much easier. Commander Adeyemi, we cannot thank you enough. Yora's voice was unsteady. You saved us. You saved all of us, when no one else would even respond. Yeah, we noticed. Adeyemi's expression hardened slightly. Your distress call made it pretty clear you had been asking for help for a while. That bothered us. The other species have protocols, procedures. They need approval from councils and committees. They need to get their priorities straight. One of Adeyemi's escorts, a shorter human with pale skin and red hair, spoke up. Her name tag read Lieutenant Okoye. We have a saying on Earth. All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. You're Edmund Burke, I said. And they looked at me in surprise. We do have some human literature in our databases. Not much, but some. Well, look at that. Okoye grinned. Somebody did their homework. We also have a saying, Adeyemi continued. If you see someone in trouble, you help them. It is pretty simple. Does not require a committee meeting. Your approach is very direct, Yora said carefully. Our approach works. Adeyemi gestured to the viewport, where her fleet hung in space like protective guardians. Your swarm problem is gone. Completely. We will stay in system for another week to make sure nothing replicates from debris, but you are safe now." "What do you want in return?" I asked, because someone had to ask it. "Resources? Territory? Trade agreements? What?" Ademi looked at me like I had just asked her to explain quantum mechanics using only interpretive dance. "What do we want?" "Yes, you came to our aid, you saved our species, surely you want something in return?" "We want you to not die." She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. "That is what we want. We want you to keep existing. That is the payment." The three of us stared at her. "That is it?" Then asked. "That is it." Ademi shrugged. "Though if you are offering, we would not mind setting up some basic trade relations. We like meeting new people, learning new things. Your art, your music, your culture, that stuff is valuable to us. More valuable than resources or territory. You came all this way, risked your lives, lost ships and people." Yara's voice trailed off. "We lost 6 ships, Ademi said quietly. 43 people. We will mourn them, we will remember them. But they died doing what humans do. Helping, protecting, standing up when someone needs to be stood up for." She met Yora's eyes. "Would you have preferred we stayed home?" "No," Yora said quickly. "No, absolutely not. I do not understand." "We come from a death world," Ademi said simply. "We spent most of our history fighting each other, fighting our environment, fighting everything. We got very, very good at it, and then, eventually, we figured out that maybe all that skill at fighting could be used for something better. Something more." She smiled. "We are still working on it, still figuring it out. But we decided that if we have the power to help, we have the responsibility to help." "That is a very optimistic philosophy," I said. "It is a very human philosophy," Okoye added. "We are stubborn like that." Captain Yora was quiet for a moment, and I could see her processing this. Processing the fact that these Deathworlders, these beings from a planet that killed everything on it just for practice, had developed a moral code that apparently superseded politics and profit and all the careful calculations the rest of the galaxy relied on. "You are not what we expected," Yora finally said. "Nobody ever expects humans to be nice," Ademi said with a laugh. "They hear Deathworlder and they think violence and aggression and danger. And yeah, we are all those things. But we are also other things. We are curious. We are creative. We are compassionate. We contain multitudes, as one of our poets said. Your Walt Whitman, I supplied, and got another surprised look. Okay, you really did do your homework." "I like poetry," I admitted. We talked for another hour. Commander Ademi and her people told us about Earth, about humanity, about their history and culture and the long, complicated road they had traveled to get to the stars. They told us about their early days in space, about the mistakes they made, the lessons they learned, the principles they developed. They told us about the Terran Defense Fleet, which was apparently not a military force in the traditional sense, but rather a volunteer organization dedicated to helping anyone who needed it. A navy that served not a nation or planet, but an ideal. The idea that intelligent beings should look out for each other, that if you had the power to make things better, you did so. It was naive, it was idealistic. It was completely impractical by any reasonable standard of galactic politics. And it had just saved us when nobody else would. "There is something I need to tell you," Captain Yora said eventually, "about the other species, the ones who did not respond." "We know," Ademi said. "We got your full distress call. We saw who you contacted. We saw who ignored you. They will have explanations, justifications. They will say they were following proper procedures. They left you to die because it was inconvenient to help." Ademi's voice was flat. "They will dress it up in diplomatic language and procedural requirements, but that is what it comes down to. You needed help. They chose not to provide it." "What will you do?" I asked. "Do?" Ademi raised an eyebrow. We will make sure everyone knows what happened here. We will make sure the galaxy understands that when the Korvax and the Selenar and all the others were too busy with their meetings and their protocols, humans showed up. We will not threaten anyone. We will not demand anything. We will just make sure the facts are known. That will embarrass them, Yara said. Good. Lieutenant Okoye's voice was sharp. Maybe embarrassment will motivate them to do better next time. You are playing a dangerous game, I said. The established powers will not appreciate being shown up by a newcomer species. Then they should have done their jobs, Adeyemi said simply. We are not trying to replace them. We are not trying to take over. We just want to make sure people get help when they need it. If that makes us unpopular, we will deal with it. You are absolutely insane, I said. We get that a lot. Before Commander Adeyemi and her people left, she gave us a data package. Contact information for the Terran Defense Fleet, emergency channels, protocols for requesting assistance, trade proposals, cultural exchange programs, everything we would need to maintain relations with humanity. We will be around, she said. We are establishing permanent outposts in several systems near here. If you need anything at all, you call us. We will come. Why? Yara asked one last time. Why do this? Adeyemi smiled. Because somebody has to. And we decided it might as well be us. She offered her hand again, and Yara took it. Take care of yourselves, Captain, and maybe think about what kind of galaxy you want to live in. One where people help each other, or one where everyone hides behind procedures and politics. You are trying to change how things work, I said. We are trying to make things work better, Adeyemi corrected. There is a difference. After they left, after the human fleet began to disperse to their assigned patrol routes and support duties, after we started receiving reports from our surviving colonies about human aid ships arriving with supplies and medical teams and engineers, Captain Yara called me to her ready room. Your thoughts, Velrek? I considered my words carefully. I think humans are either going to save the galaxy or get themselves killed trying. Possibly both. They do not seem to understand the concept of impossible. No, they do not. Yara pulled up a star chart, highlighting the human territories. They are small, new to the galactic stage. No major resources, no particular strategic advantages, nothing that would make them a power player by traditional metrics. Except they have principles, I said, and they actually follow them. That is going to make them enemies. It is also going to make them friends. I thought about Commander Adeyemi, about Lieutenant Okoye, about Hayes and Garcia and all the others who had risked everything to save people they had never met. The established powers relied on us being too desperate to care about their politics. They thought we would just accept their excuses and their procedures and their endless delays. And then humans showed up and made them all look like cowards. Not just cowards, I said. Obsolete. Humans proved that the old way of doing things, the careful calculations and political considerations, all of that means nothing when someone actually needs help. They proved that you can just decide to be better, to do better. Yara was quiet for a long moment. The Korvax sent an official communication. They want to congratulate us on our survival and discuss future defense arrangements. After ignoring our distress call for 3 weeks. Yes. What did you tell them? A slow, vicious smile spread across Yara's face. I told them we would be happy to discuss it, right after they finished consulting with their council about potential meeting parameters. I suggested they take their time, maybe 3 weeks or so. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Over the following weeks, the story of what happened spread across the galaxy. The swarm that had threatened multiple civilizations. The distress calls that went unanswered. And the humans, the Deathworlders from an unknown system, who showed up and saved everyone while the established powers were busy having meetings. The Korvax tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. The Selenar released a statement about cosmic timing and divine will. The Valkyrie suddenly discovered they had been planning to help all along but had been delayed by technical difficulties. Nobody believed them. Meanwhile, humans were everywhere. Not invading, not conquering, just helping. They showed up at disaster sites with relief supplies. They patrolled trade routes that had been abandoned as too dangerous. They responded to distress calls that nobody else answered. They did it all with that same strange combination of military efficiency and casual friendliness that seemed uniquely human. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy started to change. Species that had relied on the old powers started making direct agreements with humans instead. Trade routes shifted. Defense pacts were rewritten. The careful political balance that had existed for centuries began to crack and reform into something new. Something better, I like to think. 6 months after the Battle of Meridian Line, as it was now called, I was reassigned to a joint operations center coordinating between our fleet and the Terran Defense Fleet. My first day, I walked into the command center and found it full of humans and aliens working side by side, sharing information and strategies and what appeared to be coffee. Commander Adeyemi was there, because of course she was. She saw me and waved me over. "Oh, Velrek. Good to see you. We were just discussing patrol schedules. Want some coffee?" I have been warned that human coffee is potentially lethal to most species. Fair point. Want some tea instead? We have tea that probably will not kill you. You are not selling this very well. She laughed, and it was a good sound. A sound that said things were going to be okay. That we were building something here, something that would last. I took the tea. It did not kill me. It was actually quite good. And as I sat there, surrounded by humans and aliens working together, planning how to make the galaxy a safer and better place, I thought about Captain Yora's question. What kind of galaxy did we want to live in? I knew my answer now. We wanted to live in the galaxy humans were building. The one where people helped each other not because it was profitable or politically convenient, but because it was the right thing to do. The one where Deathworlders from a backwater system could show up and save everyone while the old powers were busy arguing about procedures. The galaxy where somebody always responded to the distress call. The galaxy where, when everything seemed lost and hope was failing, you could count on hearing that distinctive human accent over the comms, casual and confident, asking for your coordinates and telling you to hang on. Help was on the way. The galaxy where no one else responded, but Earth's Deathworlders appeared. And thank every star in the sky that they did.